How did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
I was ice skating. It was on December 7th, a Sunday, and we just got done ice skating. A friend of mine and I, and he and I went down and we skated at the Atlantic City Convention Hall. We went down to Pacific Avenue to get a jitney to come back home. And the jitney had stopped up at the next corner. It was pretty cold, so we was waiting for him to get here pretty quick. Well, we got in, we sat in the back, and the jitney driver was telling the guy, he says, no, the Japanese, they bombed Pearl Harbor. And then the radio started barking away, telling us about the bombing and everything. That's the first I heard about it. I didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was.
What was that like for you to hear that your country had been attacked?
Well, I thought it was a bad situation. I didn't like it at all, and I knew that we would get even. We'd be in the war soon.
So take me through, Mr. Hansberry, how did you end up in the service?
Well, I had to go back a little bit before that. I worked for an ice cream company. I was a manager of the store. I got 38 cents an hour. The help got 28 cents. And as it got late into the summer, they started closing the stores up. This is in 1942 because they were having trouble getting sugar. So I knew that they were going to be out of business before long. So I heard a friend of mine was getting $1.88 an hour as a welder at the New York shipyard. He told me, he says, you ought to come up there and see if you can get a job. I said, well, I can't weld. He said, just tell me you want a job as a helper. So I got up there, I hitchhiked up, and there was 2 lines in the employment office there. At the head of each line was a desk. And when I got up to the man at the desk, he looked at me and says, what do you want? I said, I want to get a job. He says, yeah, but you're not a mechanic. I said, no. I said, I want to get a job in the sheet metal because the men were saying in line there they're hiring sheet metal workers. So I said, I work for sheet metals for Sykes in Atlantic City. I named some other places in Vincent. And he said, yeah, but he said, show me a card or something where you did this. So I said, well, I don't have it. He said, look, you have to leave. He says, you're holding the line up. So I went back home. I enrolled in a vocational school in the sheet metal department. And I talked to the teacher before the class. I told him I'm trying to get a job in the daytime at the New York shipyard, but I had to have something to show that I'm involved with sheet metal work. So he says, well, when the class is over tonight, come up and see me. He said, I'll give you a card. So he gave me a card that was blue and red lettering like an arc on it, Atlantic City Vocational Trade School. And it had my name and says is engaged in sheet metal work. So the next day I hitchhiked back up to Camden, and I got in the other line because I didn't want to get the guy I had before. And the man asked me the same thing. He said, you're too young. I said, no. I said, I worked with sheet metal for a long time. I said, I'm going to school at night to learn how to operate the break and bend machines. So I gave him the card. So he took the card, he wrote the number down, and told me to go through this door right over there and get fingerprint. That's how I got the job in the shipyard. Now, I was there for about 5 months, I guess, until November. And we worked in shifts, 3 8-hour shifts. Every week we changed shifts. And we were working from midnight to 8 shift. And we're sitting around halfway through the shift having our snacks that we brought with us. And this one fellow, I was 19, he was about 22, 23. He asked me, he says, Ed, have you heard from your draft board yet? I says, no. I said, I'll probably go home someday. There'll be something there. So he reached in his pocket, and he brought out a card with his picture on it. And it says, engage in essential work exempt from military service. And this guy, he was doing the same kind of work I was doing. So he told me, when you go off the carrier tomorrow morning, go across the street there, up the stairs to the side of that building, and go in and tell them you expect to hear from the draft board. And he said, they will call them on the telephone, they'll send them a telegram, they'll give you one of these cards. Well, I said, yeah. So I never did it. And then on the 21st of November 1942, I joined the Marine Corps in Philadelphia. That's where I did my enlisting.
Why the Marine Corps?
I just liked the Marine Corps. I thought it was a good outfit.
So after you joined the Marine Corps, where did they send you?
Well, first I went down to Parris Island, South Carolina.
For boot camp?
Through boot camp. And I had an incident there. Well, at the end of your training, you wind up at the rifle range. That's the last thing. And you have mess duty. And that's a lot of fun down there. Because you're doing something different. Anyway, when it came to the rifle range, the day before we shot for record, the first 17 shots I put in the bullseye. And as we moved back, before you know it, I had about 5 officers and men from the rifle range around there standing back of me, watching me. Well, I wound up a shot expert, and one of the coaches, the sergeant, come over, he's a gunnery sergeant, says, you know, he says, that's a high rate you got there for expert. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but the next day was firing for record. And I went out there, the first 5 shots I got what they call Maggie's Yours, a red flag. I missed the bullseye altogether. And I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't adjust the rifle. It takes a while. I kept moving the windage over and everything. Finally, I started to hit it, but I was too far back, so I never qualified with the rifle. Now, what happened, I was on my way down to North Carolina, and a friend of mine who was in our platoon, he told me that this fellow, Briskman, changed the windage on my rifle at night. He says, I saw him do it. He says, I didn't want to say nothing until he was back there. He said, you probably would have killed him. I said, yeah. So that's what happened with that. And from there, I went to New River, North Carolina. From New River, North Carolina, I went out to San Diego, and I was there about 3 weeks, and we were sent overseas. I went to Pago, Samoa, and I was in a machine gun company. And it's very interesting. At times, after the drills were over, they took you over to a semicircle of logs. You sat down there, and they taught you how to read the Lanzetti compass. Well, I'm listening to everything. So one night, about 8:30 at night, they told you to fall out. So the platoon's out there, and they had the toughest guys you ever seen in your life for Marine sergeants. These guys were all from Shanghai, you know, the original, and they were good. They really knew their stuff. So he walked over, he said, you know, you had so damn much to say the other day out here. He said, here, you take the compass. So now it's dark. So they take you across the road, and they give you an azimuth, 150, 170, whatever they gave you. And they told you, you go 300 yards, and you'll find a trail there, and there'll be guys on the trail to bring you back. Well, the guys couldn't read the compass, so you couldn't do it. Now, the way you did it, the first night they gave me the compass, I came 5 feet from one of the guards out there, the men going to bring you back. And the way you do it, you take a bearing on a tree, and you walk to that tree. You have to throw a poncho over you and use a light at night to look at the compass. You sight in on another tree at the same azimuth, and you walk to that one. And you continue walking that until you get where you think you're 300 yards, and that's how it's done. And from also there, they taught you a little demolition. And while that was ongoing, they sent me to what they call brigade school. Now, brigade school, they taught you all about map reading, overlays, how to make maps and stuff. And what they would do with these men, they'd put you aboard ashore at one of the Japanese-held islands. And they'd say there's always 2 of you at least together. And you go on there and hide out, and if it's gun emplacements or anything like that, airfields, you make maps of it. Well, I was here 4 days, and the lure line came in, the Queen of the Matson liners. It took everybody, including me, to Melbourne, Australia, where I joined the 1st Marine Division, and I was put into the engineers.
So can you please talk to me about your first experience in combat on Cape Gloucester?
Well, like I said, we were on LSTs, and the LST, the ship pulled right up to the beach, but we had to wait from our waist down. We had to wade into the beach, and the beach was all covered with branches and everything hanging over it. It was very dense, and it was cloudy. Well, about 12 o'clock it started to rain, and it seemed to rain harder and harder. Now, as battles go, Cape Gloucester was an easy operation. Yeah, it's always tough for somebody, but one of my first experiences, 3 of us fellas, Frank Harvath and R.E. Horton, us 3 were together on the far end of our line, and there was a great big tree there. It must have been 4 feet in diameter. So we're up and back of this tree. So I jumped over the other side of the tree, because we weren't seeing. We were crawling at them because there was shots firing. And when I got over, the other 2 guys got over. As soon as I got over, a machine gun opened up, and it went up and down that there log, blew all the bark off and everything over our heads. So we realized that now there was a pillbox right not too far in front of us. You wouldn't even know it because all the vegetation and everything had grown over it. Looked just like the landscape. Well, we were stuck there. So I said, look, just wait here a few minutes. And I said, I'll go back over first. So I don't think the Japs could lower their guns any lower. That's as high, as low as they could fire when the way they were mounted. So I jumped over and nothing happened. And the next guy jumped over and nothing happened. When the other guy, before he even jumped, they start shooting. So we dug a hole underneath the tree, and that's how we got him back. I went to the far end of the tree, and I came around there and crawled, and the Japs didn't see me or anything, or their guns wouldn't shoot that far. I crawled up to the pillbox, and I took a hand grenade and threw it in there. Then I threw another one. And we found out there were 2 men in there, and they were both dead from the hand grenades. Killed both of them.
Was this your first day in combat?
This is my first day in combat.
And you had to knock out 2 of the enemy?
Correct.
How old were you, sir?
19.
What was that like for you at 19 years old to be put in this position to have to do something like that?
Well, it's, you know, that's what you were trained for, and that, you know, you had to expect it. You're in a war, you know, it's what it's all about.
So you knocked out this pillbox. From there, where do you go?
Well, we continued on, and then there was just skirmishes with the Japs, just shooting at us, and it was hard to find them. But as you moved closer and find, you know, they were shooting at somebody else, you'd see them and shoot them. And then, I'm telling you, you never seen such rain in your life. It was pouring. So we stopped about 3:30 to dig in for the night. And, you know, you eat your K rations and stuff that you brought with you. And you dig a foxhole. So I dug a foxhole, but the foxhole was full of water. So I took my poncho, covered myself, and I just laid in the mud there in the rain at night with the rifle in my arms. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, all hell broke loose. The mortars started dropping and everything, so you jumped into the foxhole. And the water went right out over the top of it. And I've never been so cold in my life. It shivered all night. It was terrible. But that was my first experience with combat.
Can you please talk to me about the terrain on Cape Gloucester?
The terrain was very heavily woody. It was very thick. And our objective was the airfield. We landed there just south of a place called, we landed at Borgen Bay, which is south of Talasea, a little note up the north of us. And our objective was south to capture the airfield. Well, we captured it in 4 days, and there wasn't much fighting after that, and we set up our camp there. We were bivouacked there until we were relieved there, I think in March of '44, and we went to a place called Pavuvu Peninsula in the Russell Islands, and that's where the Marines stayed for the rest of the war until they went to Okinawa. That was the last stop for us.
Going back to Cape Gloucester, or that incident with the pillbox, could the Japanese see you from your position where you threw the grenade?
No, what I did, I got up right where I could, just like I was touching this wall right here. I was up against the pillbox, and there was an opening on the side, and I threw the hand grenade in there.
Was it the opening that they were firing out of?
Right, but the gun, it was pointed this time the other way, and it wasn't firing. See, the Japs, obviously, they didn't see me.
What's the strategy when you're using hand grenades? I mean, do you pull the pin then?
You pull the pin, and they have what they call a spoon. Looks like a handle. And as long as you're holding that spoon, the hand grenade won't go off. As soon as you release the spoon, you'll hear it snap, and you got between 5 and 7 seconds to get rid of it.
So did you hold it on for a little bit?
Well, as soon as I pulled the pin out, I was ready, and I threw it right in. I didn't wait there too long.
But you threw 2 of them?
I threw 2 of them. I threw another one. And I looked inside, and I could see these guys in there, and I waved to my friends, and they came up. And from there, we kept on going.
So, in the 1st Marine Division, you know, they have 3 regiments. Let's take the 5th Regiment, for example. That's separated into rifle companies, A, B, C, D, you know. So, you're in the 1st Marine Combat Engineer Battalion.
Right.
And you're Company B. Are you attached to different rifle companies?
Yes.
Or how does
well,
it work?
Here's how it works. In the 1st Marine Division, you have the 1st Regiment, the 5th, the 7th, and the 11th. The 11th is artillery, and the 17th are engineers. Now, when you go into combat, one platoon is assigned to, one squad of Marines is assigned to a company, a rifle company.
One squad of the engineers.
One squad, 10 men. And you stay with them, and if minefields or booby traps or anything, you move right up with them. You're right with them all the time.
So what unit were you attached to then?
I was attached to the 7th Marines.
Different companies or the same company?
The same company. Now, one of the incidents that we had one night, we were close to the water further up on the island. We were going around the island, and there was like a little waterway that came in between the reefs there, and we were dug in on that one side. Well, about 3 o'clock in the morning, a dog started to bark, and then it stopped, and pretty soon we could hear something moving. So the guys, there were 2 men to a foxhole, and you're set maybe 5 yards apart, and one of the guys saw hands. He said, "There's something out there coming this way." So somebody down further started shooting. Well, when they did, everybody started shooting. And then when daylight came, right in front of me, there was there was 2 dead Japs. One was right in front of me. He was a captain, and he had a saber. So I jumped in the water, and I got the saber. I took that, and that was probably one of the closest calls I had on Peleliu outside of mortars.
Peleliu or Cape Gloucester?
Excuse me, on Cape Gloucester. Other than that, I guess it was the third night we dug in. We had the same experience. We dug in, and we could hear these noises, and all of a sudden everybody starts shooting. And it's next morning in front of us and to the right and left, there were 6 dead Japs. And the Japs, we liked it in the daytime when the Japs would charge us because it made it easier. I guess you've seen it on Saipan, which I wasn't on. The Japs would make these charges.
Bonsai charge.
Right, and that they stopped doing that later, like at Okinawa.
What weapon did you carry?
I carried an M1 rifle.
What did you think about the M1?
It's a good rifle. It fires 8 rounds, and it was one of the best rifles in World War II. Now, down at Paris Island, when we were first down there, we were issued the 1903 rifle, which was bolt action. And we were there about a month, and they came in with the M1s. And the coaches on the rifle range thought that the rear sight, which is a tiny hole, was too big. It should have been made smaller, but I don't know how they could have done it. The engineers or somebody gave it a lot of thought, I guess, before they did it. But it was a very good rifle, very accurate. And the advantage was you could keep squeezing the trigger off. They had right in the trigger guard, there was a slit up in the front part of it with a little blade there, and that was a safety. If you pulled that back towards the trigger, the gun wouldn't fire. And it was a very good weapon. It weighed 8.39 ounces.
Could you?
I'm sorry.
Tell me.
8 pounds, 3.5 ounces. That was the weight of the M1.
Could you please tell me, on Cape Gloucester, as you were going through the jungle, what's it like, when you're in a thick jungle and you don't know where the enemy is?
Well, it's very scary. You have to go slow. You don't see the Japs in the jungle. You don't see them until somebody takes a shot. And a lot of times, in the direction of all the other Marines, they'll just shoot over that way. So he gets a lot of recognition, And this is the way it is. Until you get to a place where there's a band of them or something, and you're fighting, then that's a little different. You know where they are, and they know where you are.